Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to update and upgrade our Scion of the Ur-Dragon EDH deck, and it will never be the same again. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things magic. What's up, MTG BC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of the Up and Up series. This time, we're updating and we're upgrading Scion of the Ur-Dragon. Not only are we updating and upgrading the dragons, we are updating and upgrading the spells. We are updating and upgrading the land base. We are turning over about 1/4 of this deck. As I said before the opening credits ran, this Scion of the Ur-Dragon deck will never be the same again. Let's begin with the dragons. All right, the first dragon coming out is Bladewing the Risen. It's a 4/4 flying for 3, 2 black and 2 red. When it ETBs, we return another dragon from our graveyard to the battlefield, and it also has a Rakdos fire-breathing ability. Now, for the purposes of this 5-color Scion deck, that ability was not used very often. Bladewing the Risen was included because of its recursive ability when it ETBs, seldom ever becoming a copy of it through Scion, only to get it into the graveyard for the purposes of any kind of graveyard shenanigans, maybe by casting a Reanimate to get Bladewing out and then a second dragon out as well. Well, Bladewing the Risen has now become obsolete, particularly because of the high valuable cards that were printed in Battle for Baldur's Gate. Replacing Bladewing the Risen is the Ancient Brass Dragon, a 7/6 flyer for 5 and 2 black, so the exact same amount of mana, 7 mana for the Ancient Brass Dragon, 7 mana for Bladewing the Risen, but we're getting a body that's almost twice the size. When Ancient Brass Dragon deals combat damage to a player, we will roll a d20, and when we do, we will put any number of target creature cards with total mana value X or less from graveyards onto our side of the battlefield, where X is the result. As you can see, why Bladewing is yielding its spot to Ancient Brass Dragon is that just from a recursive standpoint from our own end, Ancient Brass Dragon is going to do it better than Bladewing ever did. And let's face it, maybe in one of our opponent's graveyards, there might be a creature we want more than one of our dragons. I know it's blasphemous to think about, but it is a possibility. Ancient Brass Dragon will allow us to do that, and Bladewing the Risen never could. So Bladewing out, and this Elder Dragon is in. Dragon number 2. Ancient Bronze Dragon. It's a 7/7 flyer for 5 and 2 green. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we'll roll a d20. When we do, we'll put X +1/+1 counters on each of up to 2 target creatures, where X is the result. Now, Ancient Brass Dragon would be a fantastic target for Scion. You fly in with Scion, no blockers are declared, you activate Scion's ability, it becomes the Ancient Bronze Dragon, and then it deals that combat damage, and then we get some +1/+1 counters thrown onto Scion, and perhaps another dragon if we're fortunate enough to have one on our side of the battlefield. But with a 7/7 body, if this does become a copy by Scion's ability, well, that's just 1/3 of the way to lethal commander damage and closer to one of the opponents losing the game. Ancient Bronze Dragon is going to take the place of Silumgar, the Drifting Death. Now, this is a 3/7 flying hexproofer for 4 Dimir colors, and this is the only dragon in the entire build that could not trigger Temur Ascendancy's card drawing ability or Garruk's Uprising card drawing ability, because each of those cards require the creature to have a power of 4 or more, and Silumgar doesn't have that. Silumgar's inclusion into this build was to protect Scion from any spot removal. A creature is one of our opponents targets Scion, we activate Scion's ability to become a copy of Silumgar. The hexproof makes that spell fizzle. One of the avenues of changing the scope of this build by turning over a quarter of the deck is that we are dialing back our dependence on Scion. Scion is still our general. It will still lead us into battle. It will still be the commander of our Thunder of Dragons, but our dependence to utilizing him as our only win condition, or one of our major win conditions, is no longer going to be in this deck. So because Scion is less dependent, its protection will also be less needed, which is why Silumgar is going to yield to the Ancient Bronze Dragon. With that swap, we are also highlighting one of the foci of this updating and upgrading. With keeping Silumgar, we're trying to be reactive to spot removal. By replacing Silumgar with the Ancient Bronze Dragon, we are going to be more proactive in pushing the envelope. That's going to be a feature seen throughout this video. Dragon number 3 is Ancient Copper Dragon. 6/5 flyer for 4 and 2 red. When this deals combat damage to a player, we roll a d20, and we create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. Can you just imagine the luck of hitting that d20 and getting 20 treasure tokens from Ancient Copper Dragon? The amount of mana acceleration and mana fixing provided by that dragon, that is no wonder why Ancient Copper Dragon, at the time of this video's construction, is the most valuable card from Battle for Baldur's Gate. Ancient Copper Dragon is going to take the place of Hellkite Tyrant, a 6/5 flying trampler for 4 and 2 red. Whenever it dealt combat damage to a player, we gained control of all artifacts that player controls. Now, it also has another ability where if at the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 20 or more artifacts, we would win the game. And for the history of having this Scion deck, not one time have I ever reaped the benefits of winning the game by having 20 or more artifacts. Yes, I was able to snake some artifacts away from opponents in the past, some mana rock, some equipment, even some artifact lands. But Hellkite Tyrant's artifact thievery is no match and no comparison to Ancient Copper Dragon's ability to create treasure tokens. Again, we are becoming less reactive and more proactive. Next card going in, and this is one that we can consider a win condition based upon some of the other cards we have in this build, and that is Ancient Gold Dragon, a whopping 7/10 flyer for 5 and 2 white. When it deals combat damage to a player, we roll a d20, and then we create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the result. If we have Dragon Tempest on our side of the battlefield, and or Scourge of Vulcus, then each of those tokens are going to come into play at the same time. They're all going to see each other, and they're all going to deal direct damage in massive proportion, especially if we're fortunate enough to roll double digits. That should be enough to say good game. So Ancient Gold Dragon being one of the rare white dragons to enter into the build, it's actually going to replace one of the other white dragons in this build, and that is Scalelord Reckoner. Originally included in this build based upon a misinterpretation of its ability, it's a 4/4 flyer for 3 and 2 whites. Whenever a dragon we control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, we can destroy target non-land permanent that player controls. So this was more, again, of a reactive move that I originally thought could coincide with Scion's ability. However, once Scion is targeted by a spell or an ability, flipping his ability and making him a copy of Scalelord Reckoner will not trigger its destroy target non-land permanent ability. So outside of Scalelord Reckoner having its own presence on the battlefield, it is a creature that Scion would not become a copy of in response to removal because it just wouldn't work. So we're going to remove the reactive portion of that, and we're going to push the envelope with Ancient Gold Dragon and its ability to create an unbelievable high number of 1/1 dragon creature tokens. All right, next up, and if you've been following along at home, you know what dragon number 5 is going to be. That's the Ancient Silver Dragon, a whopping 8/8 flyer for 6 and 2 blue. Whenever Ancient Silver Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20, and then we draw cards equal to the result, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. I'm going to say this right now for the purposes of what this build is going to look like at the conclusion of this video. Scion of the Ur Dragon, if that's on the battlefield early in the game, its first target for me is Ancient Silver Dragon. If we can swing in and connect with combat damage, and on average draw 10 cards with no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, we should be set for victory every single time that happens. Ancient Silver Dragon may end up becoming one of the most powerful dragons we'll see in this Scion build. It will take the place of Nicol Bolas, one of the original Elder Dragons. It's a 7/7 with flying for 2 blue, 2 black, and 2 red. And during our upkeep, we pay Grixis colors or we sacrifice Nicol Bolas. And whenever Nicol Bolas damages an opponent, that opponent discards their entire hand, and we ignore this ability if that opponent has no cards left in their hand. I will fully disclose that this card was included in the original Scion build based upon its ability to empty an opponent's hand. In particular, empty the opponent of a blue mage. We did not want control being a factor in any of the games we sat down with our Scion deck. That and perhaps the controlling Super Friends build comes to mind as well. Nicol Bolas did its job admirably. When Scion would go into combat, we would quick activate the ability. Nicol Bolas would strike, and the opponent would angrily discard their hand. Well, with Ancient Silver Dragon and its ability to draw us so many cards with no maximum hand size, Nicol Bolas is going to yield to the Ancient Silver Dragon, with the thought process being we will have more resources in our hands than any blue mages could. All right, the next card to be added, the next dragon to be added, an absolute definite choice for Scion to become and swing into combat with. It's the Earthquake Dragon. It's a 10/10 flying trampler for 14 and a green mana, but we will never pay 14 and a green mana for this card because it costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of dragons we control. More often than not, we're going to want to activate Scion to become a copy of this and send it into combat at an opponent, striking that opponent down for at least 10 points of commander damage. It also has a built-in recursive ability. By paying 2 and a green and sacrificing a land, we can return Earthquake Dragon from our graveyard to our hand and then get it right back onto the battlefield for, hopefully, just 1 green mana. Earthquake Dragon is one of our beat-down creatures in this deck. It is one of the ones that we want to become a copy of with Scion if we are close to eliminating an opponent by lethal commander damage. With that in mind, this beat-down dragon is going to take the place of a beat-down dragon that used to be in the 99 of this build, and that is Hellkite Overlord, an 8/8 flying trampler with haste for 4, a black, 2 red, and a green mana. It also has fire breathing. Each red mana gives it +1/+0, but it also had a regenerate ability. Paying Golgari colors, we could regenerate Hellkite Overlord, which at times was utilized through Scion's ability to help protect it from any spot removal. Well, as stated earlier, we are becoming a little less dependent on utilizing Scion as our primary win condition. So with that being in mind, its ability to protect Scion is not that important as it was prior to all of these additions. And let's face it, a 10/10 flying trampler is bigger than an 8/8. The next creature to come in, and one I cannot wait to start having all kinds of really, really fun shenanigans with Scion in this deck, That's Miram Sentinel Worm, a 6/6 flying dragon with Ward 2 for 3 and Teamer colors. Whenever another non-token dragon ETB is under our control, we're going to create a copy of that, except the token is not legendary if that dragon is legendary. One of the best things about having Scion as a commander is we have the ability to fill the graveyard with so many powerful dragons that through a mass recursion spell like Living Death or Patriarch's Bidding will help us win the game on the spot with direct damage when those dragons ETB. Miram Sentinel Worm makes that even more potent, not just from a recursive standpoint, but just having it on the battlefield and under our control. Imagine a world with Miram on our side of the battlefield and a sneak attack going off with dragon after dragon after dragon. The original cards that come into play may get sacrificed at the end of the turn, but the tokens created by Miram will not. Miram easily is going to replace Okagachi Vengeful Kami, a 6/6 flying trampler for 1 in Wooburg colors. Whenever Okagachi Vengeful Kami dealt combat damage to a player, if that player attacked us during their last turn, we exile target non-land permanent that player controls. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the ability to kind of tone back the reactive portions of this build and be a lot more proactive. With Miram, we're being more proactive. We're pushing the envelope even greater. With Okagachi, it just kind of sat back there and was one of those situations where, oh, you attacked us? Well, now we're going to attack you and exile one of your permanents. That's no longer the case. The slots in this dragon deck are much too valuable to be given to creatures that are just waiting to do something. We would rather have creatures that just do something no matter what. All right, a few dragons left to add. We've got 3 more. The next one is Wrathful Red Dragon, a 5/5 flyer for 3 and 2 red. Whenever a dragon we control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. Now, for the purposes of this build, we have very few dragons that are going to have vigilance. So most of these dragons, when we have them on our side of the battlefield, we want to send them into combat. So it's not likely that we're going to have many of these bad boys sitting back waiting to do something. The deterrent is that since they all fly, it's going to be difficult for our opponents to reconcile sending their creatures into combat, knowing that they're going to take the damage reflected back by Wrathful Red Dragon and any other dragon because of its ability. This also gives us a very wonderful alternate win condition in the form of including a copy of Blasphemous Act, one that we'll see later on in this update. Wrathful Red Dragon is going to take the place of Wasitora Nikuru Queen, a 5/4 flying trampler for 2 in Jund colors. When Wasitora dealt combat damage to a player, that player would sacrifice a creature. If the player can't, we would create a 3/3 Jund colored cat dragon creature token with flying. Again, this was one of those creatures that was tough to bring out of this build because we have very few ways to interact with Voltron commanders at this point in time. Now, Wrathful Red Dragon having the ability to deal direct damage right to the face of our opponents, that will definitely help put the pressure on, but as it stands, outside of Wasitora's sacrifice ability that we're losing right now, Cyclonic Rift is really the only other way we can deal with a Voltron commander, so that's something that we're going to have to look ahead and watch during gameplay after updating this deck. Alright, next dragon to go in, Old Gnawbone. It's going in there, baby. 7/7 flyer for 5 and 2 green. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we're going to create that many treasure tokens. The thought process here is because of this type of deck, if we are able to generate such a huge advantage in mana acceleration, we should be able to just outclass and outvalue the entire table just based upon creating those treasure tokens. Old Gnawbone is going to replace Kokusho the Evening Star, a 5/5 flyer for 4 and 2 black. When it died, each opponent would lose 5 life, and we would gain life equal to the life lost this way. Before this update, Kokusho was one of the dragons that we would utilize with Scion for a number of ways. It helped to, swing some life our way. If Scion was going to die, we would become a copy of Kokusho and gain 15, 20, 25 life. Additionally, with enough mana, we would utilize Scion's ability to become a copy of Kokushu, and then we would cast a kicked Rite of Replication targeting Kokusho, putting those copies into play, and then the legend rule would kick in, and then they would get sacrificed, and we would drain nearly the entire table. Well, that package is being replaced by the Thunder of Dragons that we're seeing right now in this video. So because of that, Kokusho no longer has a spot at this time in this Scion build. Battle for Baldur's Gate really set the notch very, very high to be acceptable to be in the Scion deck. The dragon value, the dragon power is at an all-time high, and if it's not something that's going to be overly beneficial to the entire board or the entire way that we're trying to build our board or our battlefield, creatures like Kokusho are no longer going to have a spot in this Scion build. Like I said, this deck is never going to be the same again. The last dragon to be added, it is Goldspan Dragon. 4/4 flying haste for 3 and 2 red. Whenever it attacks or becomes a target of a spell, we'll create a treasure token. And treasures we have tap sacrifice, add 2 mana of any one color. With Ancient Copper Dragon being included and Old Gnawbone, it just made sense to also include Goldspan Dragon, just for the purposes of getting the best bang for our treasure bucks. Goldspan Dragon is going to replace Yosei the Morning Star. A lot of what we said about Kokusho applies directly to Yosei. Now, Yosei has won some games for me in the past. Its ability to tap down an opponent really will be lost in this deck. However, the theme of being less reactive and more proactive made the choice a little easier. By pulling out Yosei and its reactive ability and yielding to Goldspan and allowing us to be more aggressive and pushing the envelope, we can take this Scion deck into a different direction. All right, those are the creatures that are going in and the creatures that are coming out, but we're not done yet. We are going to continue to do some upgrading to some spells, to some removal, to some ramp. So strap in, because here we go. Going in, Monster Manual. We have an adventure here for 3 and a green. We can cast this for its ability of Monster Manual to pay 1 and a green tap, and we may put a creature card from our hand onto the battlefield. That is Quicksilver Amulet at 50% the mana value to activate. We can also cast it for its sorcery, Zoological Study. Pay 2 and a green, we can mill 5 cards and return a creature card milled this way to our hand. With more than a 1 in 4 chance of hitting a dragon odds way, we could suspect that we might be able to hit one of those dragons, particularly with all of the top of the library filtering that we have in the 99 of this build. But make no mistake about it, Monster Manual is being included in this deck based upon its Quicksilver Amulet-like ability at such a lower rate. And with that being said, Monster Manual is going to replace Quicksilver Amulet. Why keep it in here if we can do it better for less mana? And with the addition of having it as an adventure. Quicksilver Amulet is out, Monster Manual is in. The aforementioned Blasphemous Act is going in, and of course, we'll never pay 8 and a red to cast this spell. It deals 13 damage to each creature, and if we have Wrathful Red Dragon and a suite of other dragons on our side of the battlefield, we can consider that to be a win condition. Additionally, the aforementioned Rite of Replication, that is going to come out. We no longer have the Yosei, we no longer have the Kokusho package, so Rite of Replication is also going the way of the dinosaurs. Next card to include is Chaos Warp. Now, we're going to include this as a way in which to give more versatility to our removal. 2 and a red, the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library. It's not destroyed, it's not exiled. This helps with Indestructible. This is going to give us a greater scope of usage when it comes to removal. And how that's going to work is Chaos Warp is going to replace Generous Gift. Now, Generous Gift was in this build alongside Beast Within. Each did the exact same thing of destroying target permanents. So with that, redundancy in mind, we'll take out Beast Within version 2.0 to put a different type of removal that allows us to be a little more versatile with interacting with our opponents. All right, next card up. Now we're moving into some ramp, and we've got 3 visits. 1 in a green. We're going to search our library for a forest card and put that onto the battlefield. And as long as we're talking about 3 visits, we might as well talk about Nature's Lore, because guess what? They both do the exact same thing. So 3 visits is going to replace Skyshroud Claim. Now, Skyshroud Claim is a very solid removal spell, but here we're looking to get quicker. We're looking to do things more quickly in the early game, and we can do so by getting rid of a 4-mana ramp spell and replacing it with a 2-mana ramp spell. Granted, it's only 1 land versus the 2, but still we're looking to gain tempo. And Nature's Lore is going to replace Pact of Negation. Now, this was a counterspell that we kept to help protect Scion, but as we talked about already throughout this update, we are lessening our dependence on our general, not completely phasing it out, of course, because we would never do that. We still have all the tricks in the 99. We still have multiple ways to win the game with Scion, but because of everything else we're adding right now, protecting Scion with the amount of protection spells that we had previously is no longer a necessity. All right, the last mana ramp spell going in, it is Orb of Dragonkind. 1 in a red for an artifact. We can pay a generic mana, tap this, and add 2 mana in any combination of colors. We can spend this mana only to cast dragon spells or activate abilities of dragons. Okay, not too bad. We get to fix our mana. We get to generate a couple. We can also pay a red mana, tap and sacrifice this to look at the top 7 cards of our library, and we may reveal a dragon from among them and put it into our hand, and we put the rest onto the bottom of our library in a random order. So we get some mana fixing, some mana acceleration, and with the ability to find a dragon in the mid to late game if needed, Orb of Dragonkind is going to do a lot of wonderful things in this deck. Taking the spot away, Orb of Dragonkind is replacing Rise of the Dark Realms. Now, this was one of our ultimate mass recursion win the game spells, but at 9 mana, we're going to dial this back a little bit because we have a high number of very, very high mana value dragons going in. We still have our Patriarch Spitting, we still have our Living Death, and we still have a Reanimate. So we're not completely wringing out our recursive package, but we are going to eliminate the most expensive one. And now that brings us to updating the mana base. Coming out, a surprising card is Path of Ancestry. That's coming out. It comes into play tapped. It gives us 1 mana of any color we need, and it lets us scry 1 whenever we cast a dragon spell. But with 1 in 4 cards being a dragon, that scry spell is not as frequent as we would like it to be, and plus we have a number of other spells and effects that allow us to filter the top of our deck. So with Path of Ancestry and it's coming into play tapped ability, we're going to replace that with City of Brass. Now this will give us 1 mana of any color, but each time we use it, it will cost us 1 life because it'll deal 1 point of damage to us. That won't be too much of a concern. It's more important to make sure that we can continuously maintain tempo throughout the game. All right, next up, we are going to include each of the 3 Streets of New Capenna triomes that have red in them. So that's Xander's Lounge, that's Ziatora's Proving Ground, and that's Jetmir's Garden. We're trying to prioritize red in the mana so that we can make sure that we are able to cast as many of our red spells as possible as frequently as we can. We also want to make sure that we can use that red mana as quickly as we can on cards like Sneak Attack, or if we're changing Scion's ability, if we're utilizing Scion's ability to become a copy of the Dragon Tyrant, and we need to throw 5 red mana in there for its fire-breathing ability, so it's an 11/6 flying double-strike trampler. With that kind of damage, we are able to get rid of an opponent in 1 fell swoop. Those 3 Streets of New Capenna triomes are replacing a Zagoth triome that has no red mana in it, an Endatha Triome that has no red mana in it, and a basic island. So each of these 3 cards are being replaced by the 3 Streets of New Capenna Triomes as a way in which to make sure that we can get more red mana when we need it. All right, so we have just 3 changes left. So keeping in mind that we want to focus on adding a little extra red to our mana base, but at the same time not disrupting the flow of our tempo and not disrupting or cutting back on the other colors, we are going to include a snow-covered mountain. Now, this is more of a preference than just a regular mountain, because we were going to keep a regular basic red mountain in the deck and a snow-covered mountain, because I still want this to be a true singleton deck. So adding 2 basic mountains of the same type, I still want the flavor of this to be a singleton deck, so a basic snow-covered mountain is going to replace a basic forest. And that, again, is not going to take away too much from the need for green, because we don't have a ton of need for green in this deck. And that has been addressed with some of the other lands we already have and some that we've included in this deck during this update. So the next 2 additions, what we're going to do is we're going to sacrifice a couple of our other basic lands. And in so doing, at the conclusion of this update, we'll be left with just 2 basic lands, a basic mountain and a basic snow-covered mountain. Now, I know there might be a desire and a push to go all non-basic with the land base. And trust me, I do want to do that. But I want to be able to make sure I can make opponents pay when they Assassin's Trophy one of my permanents, or when they Field of Ruin one of my lands, or when they, Path to Exile one of my creatures. I want to make sure I have the basics that I need in my library to make them pay for doing that. Now, I'm only leaving 2, so through gameplay post-update, I'll have a better idea if that's an okay number or if I need to reevaluate the overall land base, because I don't want to miss out on putting those lands onto the battlefield for free effects based upon my opponents destroying my stuff. So with that in mind, the next 2 basics that are going to come out, we're going to take out the basic plains and the basic swamp. So the basic plains, the swamp, and the island and the forest, those are all coming out. We're keeping the basic mountain and the snow-covered mountains going in the place of the forest. Taking the place of the plains is going to be a Sensei's Divining Top. The thought process here is that by sacrificing a land to include an artifact that only costs 1, I can pay 1, and I can look at the top 3 cards of my library and then put them back in any order. This will help me to filter the top of the library so that, if needed, I can pull a land from the 2nd or 3rd card underneath. I can pull one of those lands, put it on top, and make sure I draw it. And all of that just by sacrificing a basic plains. And of course, there's also the ability to tap and draw a card at instant speed if I need to, and then the top goes back onto the top of our library. Another thing to think about is, because we have other abilities and effects in this deck that allow us to, scroll rack cards to the top of our library and things like that, we also have the ability to just activate Scion's activated ability to shuffle up that top of our library if after topping we don't like what we see, or if we have some dragons in our hand from like a scroll rack or maybe a Sylvan Library effect that we really want to get off the top of our library, because, let's be honest, they're better off in the library for Scion, like Molten Steel Dragon and Skithiryx and the Dragon Tyrant, than they are in our hand. So at the expense of 1 basic land, Sensei's Divining Top should be able to help us identify the cards that we need at the top of our library. And if it's a land, you have to think that with there being close to 40 lands, we'll be down to 37 lands after this update. By close to having 40 lands, we should 1 and 3 should be a land. Statistics say it will. EDH play, well, that's another story. So we'll see how that works in further gameplay. And replacing the basic swamp is going to be a mana crypt. Now we're going to lose that basic land, but we're going to gain tempo and mana ramp in the form of an artifact that can tap for just 2 colorless mana. Now, granted, that won't help us to power Scion onto the battlefield any more quickly. However, it will allow us to activate its ability if we go land, cast Scion, and then hold up the mana crypt for the ability if needed. Again, we put in a lot of high CMC dragons, so filtering out a basic swamp to be replaced by a mana crypt should help us to power out those dragons a little more quickly. Well, there you have it, MTG BC. Like I said, never the same again. We turned over about a quarter of the Scion of the Eurodragon deck. It has been a deck that has been part of this channel for many, many moons, and now it takes a dramatic turn towards a different path and a different identity. Once again, we are not completely severing the dependence of Scion to lead us to victory. As I said throughout this deck tech, there are still the combo pieces in the deck. We still have the Dragon Tyrant, which has the ability to Dragon Breathe up to a power of 11 and then send 11 double strike commander damage right at an opponent, eliminating that opponent. We also still have the Molten Steel and the Blight, and we still have the Molten Steel and the Skitherix combo to one-shot an opponent with Infect. Now, with all of the other support dragons, we can go about it in different ways. We don't have to just rely on Scion and direct damage in other forms, like with our graveyard recursion package. We are going to see through extensive gameplay and game testing whether these changes are going to benefit the overall power of the deck, or if we have to go back to the drawing board. You will let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.